The following video is one in a series on spiritual resilience training, a non-religious view of personal values and their dynamics with others. The contents reflect a variety of principles and practices of systems theory and relational counseling for team building and family resilience. Although the series is intended to support Army Corps values, each video also encourages the viewer to reflect on their current prominent values in specific situations and to consider what values may be more appropriate to means and results that are honorable and helpful with others. Chaplain Dillard initiates creating and posting these videos. Their contents and YouTube's linked videos do not necessarily reflect specific beliefs, practices, requirements, or endorsements of the Department of Defense, its subordinate organizations, or other groups with which Chaplain Dillard is affiliated.
Welcome back. This is the second in our series on inner conflict of personal core values. I know last week, if you saw that video, and hopefully you have, it's really foundational, this one. Last week I said I would follow up with how to resolve inner conflict of personal core values, but I really need to show you what wrong looks like or can look like before we look at what right can look like. And again, I'm not espousing a particular methodology that if we do A, B, and C, we'll always get X, Y, and Z, but some general concepts of problems with the turmoil of interpersonal or inner conflict of personal core values and how to resolve some of those. So let's take a look at some common coping mechanisms of inner conflict and also why some of these things don't work, but yet we still seem to do them. First, soothing the savage beast. It's very common to try to use physical diversions to stall our alarm system, which is our emotions. If you remember from last week and previous videos, I've described emotion as a biological or a physical sensation cueing us to relational proximity. It's our values in us that cue us to draw closer to people, to draw away from people, to pause against moving forward and to look back at something we may be leaving behind, to avoid threats, to attack. But they're simply physical sensations of those spiritual values. One of the ways that we inappropriately try to deal with that conflict is just to soothe the symptoms. We try to self-soothe or to soothe the savage beast. Snacking on food, going to the gym, turning in bed early, getting a nap, drinking a strong cup of coffee, drinking a bubbly soda, filling the air with aromatherapy. And all of those things can be very pleasant. They can be helpful, but when we rely on those things to short circuit our alarm system, in other words, if our spirit is cueing our body to draw back from a conflict as a potential threat, or is cueing us to draw forward to engage a person, and we're trying to short circuit our emotions, which is an alarm system, cueing us to that action, are we doing it simply because we don't want to deal with that savage beast? If that's the case, our alarm system can't work. Now, it's certainly true that sometimes our alarm system tells us to draw away when we shouldn't. In fact, we should stand our ground or move forward. There are other times our alarm system tells us to move forward when in fact we need to stand our ground or maybe even take a step back. So the alarm system is helpful. It's not always completely accurate, meaning our emotions. But if we just want to do away with it, if we want to soothe that savage beast, that completely does away with the alarm system and is not always helpful. Secondly, we often try power plays using our position, our personality, our reputation, or whatever to get our way. If we've got some difficult things going on inside of us, rather than looking inward, and again refer to previous videos, are we valuing something that's truly solid gold, or even unrefined gold, or even something that's gold-plated, something of true value, or are we valuing something that's fool's gold? If we don't ask those deeper questions and we just rely on a power play, well, by golly, I'm in charge today. I'm the leader of this family, or I'm the supervisor in this work relationship, or I've got more education than you, or I'm more popular than you. and we try to use that position to get our way, rather than asking, is our way a good way? Then, yeah, we might accomplish our agenda, but was it a good agenda? We need to do the more difficult work of asking those deeper questions, rather than just using our position or authority or other things as a power play. This is implied: if you can't be great, at least look the part, presenting pleasantries instead of working on real problems. And we do this in many ways. We put on a smile to try to influence people by our winsome nature, or to pretend that things are well so that they might act in similar ways toward us. We dress to look professional even when we feel very incompetent. Sometimes you may have heard the phrase that the dress makes the person, or dress for success, or fake it until you make it. But outward appearances don't always translate to inward realities. It is a very superficial coping mechanism to hope that outward appearances will have a significant impact on another person, or even the other direction, have a significant impact on us spiritually. Yes, appearances can be important. We don't want to walk into a job interview with our hair uncombed and a piece of broccoli in our teeth, and we don't want to try to talk to our children with a scowl on our face. Appearances are important, but what is coming out of the heart and what is in the heart is more important, and those are the things that really translate and come out and manifest in the relationship. Another common coping mechanism is to get busy with it, that we work toward many lesser priorities instead of the few higher priorities. All of us can probably think of 2-minute tasks and easy work for us to do all day long, and be busy about busyness, but have we really gotten anything significant done? If you were to prioritize the list of things that you need to do in your family, in your workplace, in your neighborhood, there's probably a decrement list, meaning if you had to cut something, you start cutting from the bottom until you get toward the top. Now these top 3 or 4, these really need to get done. We can spend most of the day working on these bottom 5 or 6 or 7, but the top 2 or 3 or 4 are the ones that really need our attention. A coping mechanism can be to get busy at what's easy, rather than doing the harder work on the more significant tasks. Also, greasing the squeaky wheel, prioritizing our efforts by whoever or whatever creates our greatest stress. Just because somebody is really stressing us out doesn't mean that what they want should demand most of our time and energy. On the other hand, just because we're not hearing from somebody doesn't mean we shouldn't give that relationship or a task that relates to that relationship more attention and more time. We have to prioritize by not just the impact on us, but the impact on the other person. What is most significant about that task? What's going to be the long-term effects? Is this going to have a positive ripple effect that is meaningful to others, and not just self-protective or self-promoting of us? Hide and no seek, avoiding one's duties and people associated with them by avoiding, hiding, making ourselves scarce, closing the door, not answering the phone, screening calls, taking the longer route home or to work, going where we know probably no other people are, because we're really trying to avoid failure. We're trying to avoid conflict. We're trying to not add to our stress, when in fact we are prolonging or postponing our stress, because those difficult tasks and those difficult relationships that need our attention, they're just building and building and building. So it might seem to ease some tensions inside of us, but it's just delaying. It's just procrastinating the inevitable. And if we're going to eat an elephant, it's much easier to do it a bite at a time, rather than to see that the whole task needs to be done now, and it's virtually impossible to do. The blame game, assuming that all responsibility belongs to others alone or to ourselves alone. Usually there's shared responsibility. Some of the problem is ours, some of the problem is the other person's, Rarely is it entirely our fault or entirely the other person's fault. What we need to focus on is, what do we need to fix? What do we need to do better or differently in the future? We need to listen to others and their part in that, but we need to be able to divide it up so we're realistic in analyzing the problem and can be realistic in formulating solutions for ourselves, meaning our own responsibilities. And lastly, compensation. When we're struggling in one area, we often try to prove ourselves in other areas. I may not be doing well in this, but in a couple of hours I'm going to meet with this other person and we're going to have a great time. I'm going to be witty, I'm going to be winsome, I'm going to be encouraging, and that's going to show I'm a good person. Well, that may be true, but I still have responsibilities here and now in this relational context. And after that witty, winsome, encouraging time, there'll be other responsibilities in other relationships. So as good as those might go, I still have to deal with the here and now and later. I can't just compensate and ignore here and now to work on the there and then. Those are just some ways, some common ways that people ineffectively try to deal with inner conflict. Now let's take a look at what that might actually, how that might actually manifest in a very specific situation. If you remember from the previous video, these are some of the ways that personal core values are formed. We experience our values as benefits, losses, threats, or injustices in our family of origin, our culture, and key events. And over time, our levels of expectation, frequency, and duration form our personal core values, even overshadowing the original purpose and context of those values. Now, I go into more detail in the previous videos. Again, these are not the 5, they're not my 5, they're not the top 5, these are just some 5. And the larger context of benefits and threats and losses and so forth in culture and family of origin, those are also just examples to allude to the process. Now, here's a specific example of what wrong could look like. Remember, our mixed experience of benefits, losses, threats, and injustices causes these inner conflicts. And we are torn on the left side of your screen, as we'll see in a moment, between enjoying our positives and on the right side, as you'll see in a moment, resolving our negatives. For example, let's say tomorrow I have a major report due to my boss and I have a movie night with my family, the same thing we saw in the previous video. And this morning, I control the morning by rigid loyalty to my exercise and being candid with my son before school about his grades and chores. My body and my son are falling in line. Now, at the same time, I apologized to my wife for how I was quick with my son and critical of him, but she showed me no mercy. And I feel a loss of mercy. That's what the blue is. They're feeling blue. And now I'm seeing red because my spouse did not seem to care for me, and she ridiculed me. And then the black is fear or guilt, as if someone were afraid of the dark. How can our marriage possibly progress? Now, I've got the values there, personal core values, in gold. It may be pure gold, it may be unrefined gold, it may be gold-plated or fool's gold. But these are things that I value. And on the left side of your screen, you're going to see me start to promote my benefits, things that seem to work for me. And on the right side, you'll see me lashing out in the red. You'll see me mourning in the blue. You'll see me being fearful in the black, all reactive to my emotion instead of choosing what is honorable and helpful in my relationships. Now, let's see what wrong could look like. It could be that I try to control my morning by filling my calendar, closing my door, and screening my calls. That might make me look busy. It certainly does exercise my value of control. The question is, whose work am I getting done? I'm certainly getting the work done that I want to do. But is that what is most important during the day? If I'm screening my calls, I'm missing a lot of things that are trying to come into my office. Now, I may be trying to avoid a call from my wife or my son who are upset with me, but I'm also missing the possibility of resolving those relationships and bettering those relationships. I'm certainly missing work calls that may be coming in to me because I'm wanting to self-soothe and to look like I'm being productive and busy. On the other hand, I might be reliving my wife's lack of mercy over and over in my head. Rather than giving my full attention to my work and to the people who knock on my door and try to come in my office, I'm mulling over what happened this morning. That is preoccupying my mind. That's taking my energy. That is draining me of the potential of moving forward in the duties that are before me for the day. I'm living in the past. And that is not helpful to me in any relationships in the present or the near future. I could also be candid with my assistant about their mistakes. If it felt like this morning I was in control and I told my son, you got to get your grades up, you got to do better, go, 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 slap him on the behind as he goes out the door, and I'm feeling like a real man, I could continue to feel like a real man in pointing out to my assistant all the ways that they need to be better. Is that going to make my assistant want to do better? Only if I'm standing over their shoulder, verbally threatening them or visually inspecting them. Chances are, though, when I leave that relationship and walk out the door to my own office, they're going to be upset with me. They're going to feel diminished and belittled, less motivated, and they're probably going to give less focus and less energy to their job because of how I've handled that relationship. I could also send an attacking text to my wife for not caring for me. So now I'm going to not care for her by saying what a bad parent she is or how she could have stepped in and handled it instead of me doing it because I just had a minute and a half and nobody had talked to our son yet about his grades. My son, by the way, is doing extremely well in school. All three of them are doing extremely well. I just use this as a hypothetical example. But if I'm reacting because of my own anger, I could lash out in anger, and that might feel better because I vent, like letting off some steam, decreases pressure. But that pressure is going toward her. Where do you think that pressure is going to come back when I go home? It's going to come back to me. So I'm really not helping anything other than my personal feelings of inner conflict in the moment. I'm making things worse for later on. I might also control by going to the gym again during lunchtime. Maybe she says I failed at home, but I'm going to go prove by my bench press, by how much time I can do cardio, by how much I can curl or whatever, that I'm a man, and I'm a man's man. And by golly, there's proof in the mirror. There's proof in the plates on the bar. That may be true of me physically during lunch, but that has nothing to do with my relationship with my wife and my son or the report that is due to my boss later. So I am, quote unquote, investing time during lunch that has absolutely no return on that investment for what is coming up, namely my report to my boss and my family movie night that will be later. I can also delay working on that report in order to progress in lesser work. I can find 1,000 things, organizing my files, answering very simple emails, walking the halls to just check in on some of my subordinates, any number of things that make me, that check off things that are due, but maybe they're not due tonight. They're not due at a level of high visibility such as my boss. They have nothing to do with my family movie night that is scheduled like that report. So in many ways, it's a misappropriation of time. It's waste. It is fraud. It's saying that I'm getting good stuff done, when in fact, it's very, very low priority. I can also be candid by another critical text of my son. If I only had a minute and a half with him in 10 words this morning, I might think, well, maybe he didn't get it. Let me drive that nail home a little bit more. Do I really think, well, in the moment I do think, but is it really true that being hypercritical, that my son is all of a sudden going to say, wow, Dad is really upset and critical of me. I really need to do better, and that will please Dad, and we'll have a better relationship. Well, in the short term, yes, people do react to criticism in fear, But those are the kind of kids that don't come back home for Thanksgiving. They don't come back home during the summer holidays off from school. They distance themselves from their parents because they want to get away. I want my son to have a positive relationship with me, and that's not going to make that happen if I'm hypercritical. I could also snack as mercy to myself, thinking, you don't deserve all this stress. Here's another cup of coffee with some half and half in it. Here's some Snicker bites to go with that. Here's a cookie. Here's an orange. Even if I snack healthy, here's some carrot sticks, a substantive crunch to feel like I'm taking care of myself, I'm being merciful to my own body. That's still all focused on me, 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 me. So even though I may have fed myself even healthily during the day, if I go home, I have basically exercised a self-focus for 8 hours. And now when I go home, maybe my body, my digestive system is better, but my attitude is the same or worse. I'm still thinking about you, oh, me. And while there might need to be things that my wife should do for me or toward me, that's her responsibility. That's between her and God. That's not for me to say. I need to try to work on me. And a self-focus, even by self-soothing and snacking all day, is not necessarily going to help that. Could even make it worse. I can also try to control my family by choosing the movie night myself. Now, I might think that's more efficient, that I can make the decision in a few seconds versus a long discussion with the family and us looking through websites. I might think because of my education or my position in the family or anything else, I'll make a better choice. But if it's supposed to be family time, and I'm the only one making the decision, how do you think after the movie's going to go? Now, we're sitting there in the dark eating popcorn, all looking the same direction toward the screen, and maybe we all laugh, or maybe we all get excited over the guys shooting down the bad guys' spaceships. But how about family time after? If it's all about Dad, it's probably not going to be true family time. I might also seek mercy with my wife in a 2-hour-long phone call at work. Let's say that I finally came to my senses and realized I've got to take some responsibility. But if I'm doing that 2 hours on the phone at work, what am I not doing? I'm not preparing for my report that's due tomorrow. I can have a conversation with my wife at home, but I shouldn't take work home. I should do work at work and do home at home, unless it's during lunch, since my off time maybe. But I'm still living in the past. I'm still mourning that. I'm trying to get mercy by that long phone conversation. And it's inappropriate to do that much of that at work. I'm still really focused on me. Even though it might look like I'm trying to repair the relationship, it's still all about me. I'm neglecting the report. I'm neglecting other duties. And I'm kind of neglecting a more intimate relationship with my wife face-to-face by trying to do it on the phone. I can also be quote-unquote candid with my boss by reporting on others' failures in that report. I've heard this done many times, maybe even done it myself, others would have to say. Instead of focusing on what is being done and what I've yet to do, to focus on what others haven't done or what they've done poorly. To take the focus off of me and to put it on them, a way of distracting or diverting. Still feels like I'm in control, especially it's almost like a judo move. They might be coming at me and I just push it another way. But is that going to help me to be a better worker? Is that going to help my boss to succeed? Not really. It's just trying to inflate my own ego, and it's really going to hurt those other work relationships when it comes back to me from them, and it probably will. Lastly, I could email others in attacking ways because they don't seem to have cared for me. Looking through my email list and just in the first line I can tell what's critical, and because it might not feel safe to attack my wife or to have a confrontational discussion, I should say, certainly not to attack her physically or even belittle her, but to resolve that in a difficult face-to-face conversation, I might just blast some other people through email to make myself feel better and to feel like I am making some progress. I am controlling my life, and I am going to demand that others treat me better. Those are all ways that I could react to try to lessen my inner conflict. Well, let's go back over some of those ways I mentioned initially and review what I actually did that kind of lines up with some of those common failings to cope. Did not try to soothe the savage beast. Physical diversions of going to the gym and snacking to stall my anger and my hurt. Did not make a power play, lecturing my assistant, diming out others in the report, dictating the family movie night. I also tried to look the part when I couldn't really live the part. I filled my calendar and went to the gym to look successful because I wasn't truly feeling or being successful. I tried to get busy with it. I progressed in lesser work to avoid harder, more significant work. I greased the squeaky wheel to ease tension. I had a 2-hour personal phone call at work instead of doing what I needed to do at work and doing what I needed to do at home. I tried the hide and no seek method. I screened my calls to avoid stressful duties and to avoid my family. I tried the blame game, texting to blame my son, reliving the morning to blame my wife, or maybe even to solely blame myself when it should be a shared responsibility in the family. And I tried compensation. I was struggling at home in my family, so I went to the gym to try to prove my worth there. So all those are examples of what wrong can look like when trying to deal with inner conflict. Dealing with inner conflict should not be about mitigating our emotional sensations. It should be about looking at what we value. Is our value, like I've color-coded throughout the video series, color-coded our values in gold, is it solid gold, what I'm valuing? Is it maybe unrefined gold, and I need to work on it a little bit? Is it just gold-plated? It's of some value, but not as much as I think. Or might it even be fool's gold, and I need to give it up altogether and seek something that is true worth, is of true worth in my relationships and my other duties. Hope that makes some sense to you. Next week, we will look at what right can look like. Now, not the way to do it, but a way to do it. In fact, many ways to deal with inner conflict of personal core values in helpful and honorable ways. And I hope you'll join us then.
At the release date of this video, I am stationed with Research, Development, and Engineering Command, RDECOM, at Aberdeen Proving Ground, Maryland. Because the majority of our personnel are in this area, I spend most of my time here. I do, however, travel to our distant units based on command priorities and budget. I place these videos on YouTube for broad visibility to Army personnel and their families, but I hope the videos will be helpful to others too. If you are assigned to RDECOM and want to request specific topics by video, training on site or by VTC, or confidential counseling on site or by secure webcam, you can contact me at jeffrey.d.dillard.mil@mail.mil.